My name is Chris Enriquez, and I am the production manager for Wayward Voices. I'm super excited to share this conversation with you around our workshop presentation of Black Mexican. But before we do, I do want to acknowledge that although this conversation is important, it does contain subject matter that may be sensitive for some. Our playwright and our director cover subjects such as mental illness, complexities in Latinidad, and complexities in the queer identity. So viewer discretion is advised. Hope you enjoy.
Hello, everyone. I am Gineiris Garcia. I was the director for Black Mexican, this workshop presentation with Wayward Voices.
Hi, I'm Rachel Lynett. I was the playwright for this presentation with Wayward Voices. My pronouns are she, her, or they, them, and I'm going to pass it back to Gineiris.
Because I forgot my pronouns. My pronouns are she, her. Thank you for passing it back. That's perfect. I will get us started because we're here to talk. So let's talk some ish. So my first question, it's kind of standard question, is, and you also kind of answered this question in the draft of your script, but not everyone gets to see the lovely draft of your script. So what sparked this play, Black Mexican?
Yeah. So the easiest answer and the shortest answer is that there was a woman named Jessica Krug who was pretending to be Afro-Caribbean, and that I think I'm saying her name wrong, but I don't care. And that just really pissed me off because she was a tenured professor. Her apology was horrible, and she really only outed herself because the student was about to out her, and so all of those things mixed together, and people were like, well, who even gets to claim this culture? And that really upset me. And so I wanted to explore it because it's someone who I don't feel like I get to always tell people that I'm Latin without judgment. And then here's this white woman who got dreads and tanned her skin, and people are like, oh my God. And so that pissed me off, and that's why I wanted to write Black Mexican.
Yes. My favorite part of that is that pissed me off. Just that phrase is just so such a catalyst in itself. I feel like there's a lot of writing and a eschewing of different perspectives on this, and just the gut reaction of what it is so useful. Yeah, so some more stuff about this. You're talking about this question of who gets to actually claim certain cultures, and a part of what that question is, but who is asking it and at one point. You can kind of categorize that as gatekeeping, and you use this term in your play. Mm-hmm. I actually got a lot of questions about this term. Some people in our cast even were like, this is the first time I've heard that term or really had to engage with that term. So in your own words, what is gatekeeping?
So it's funny because gatekeeping is such a big concept to me that's applied across the board. And so it's not just even culturally, but I will stick to culturally because the definition can get massive. Cultural gatekeeping to me started off as a way of protecting. I think that's really important to acknowledge, that it was about protecting a culture, especially as conversations about, I also want to hear what your definition is too. This is definitely something that I want to be in exchange. But to me, I think that it was a way, with all of what the talks about cultural appropriation and versus appreciation, I think that people really wanted a way to say no, you don't get to just try on my culture. But what ended up happening because of trying to protect your culture, gatekeeping happened where it felt like certain people and certain cultures were kicking other people that are part of that same culture out because they didn't have enough of whatever X, Y, and Z. And so for me, it's I think I've got a couple of plays that explore gatekeeping, and so this is one of them. It's partnered with another play of mine called Apologies to Lorraine Hansberry. And to me, gatekeeping is one per group, usually a group that people of color kind of have to decide who gets to say that they're Latin, who gets to say that they do you have to speak Spanish? Do you have to be from a certain country? How do these lines break down? And then when we create these rules, who gets left out? And so that is what gatekeeping is to me anyway. It's an attempt to protect something, but it accidentally becomes exclusionary.
Yeah. That's so interesting that you said accidentally. I wonder about that part.
Mhm.
Yes, but to answer your or like to catch it on
Yeah.
this side, something that I found also working with the cast and talking to different people about this play is that gatekeeping is one of those terms that I know cerebrally, like academically, and know of it in, like, as you said, in many different ways,
Mhm.
and also know so closely in practice, I guess, like in my own experience. So gatekeeping can be, yes, a particular like definition of something, and also is an experience.
Yeah.
Whether you're doing it like actively gatekeeping or having someone close the gate on you, it
Yeah.
that to me is the closest definition of that. And I think, yeah, it's the feeling, that literal feeling of like having the gates closed on your face.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, a lot of what gatekeeping brings up, from what I found in conversations specifically with culture and race, is colorism and featureism, especially in this play, with the characters all really having their own background. And you could argue, Rafa and Zoe are kind of similar because of, they're in the same family, but even they have super different ways of experiencing the world.
Mhm.
And yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if there is a question in that, but I wonder often when it comes to colorism, what is where is the value,
Mhm.
like in terms of who, or I guess this also has to do with gatekeeping. There seems to be like a like held value, a held truth or something, and I'm just like, who is holding that truth and why?
Yeah.
Um,
So you definitely hear one of my cats in the background. So I'm sorry about that. But so I don't know who's holding the truth, and it feels like the hand keeps changing. And like, there's a part of me that's suspicious. Like, I think a lot about like how a lot of the things that we have within our cultures is just a sneaky way that like white supremacy is snuck in. And so like, who's the actual defining person is white people, and it's like they're not even. Why do they get a say? Like, why are they even involved? And because I think about the ways in which like looking at colorism, and it's so much about like you have to like look like you have to be tan. Like if you're too, I have friends who are Mexican who like look white, whatever that means, right? Or white passing, which I have problems with both those ways of saying it. But and and they're like, well, I get excluded too because I'm not brown enough. And then it's like, well, I get excluded because people look at me and they're like, oh, she's just black. And so it's just like there's like this like perfect, it's like a weird recipe, like a perfect brown you have to be, which is kind of surreal. And I think it comes from, and I think that ideal comes from white people. And so I don't like, I try to struggle what I struggle with, and I think I'm answering the question is like, I wish that we would unpack more where we got this idea from, and really like acknowledge that this is not really part of our culture. This was like colonization through and through, and we need to be able to see that and check that. And yeah, because it didn't come from us in the beginning, it came after Spain came over, and that's a whole other conversation. But like, I just wish we'd take more time unpacking the reasons that we look at things, because yeah, like it truly does feel like it's like add a little bit of brown and there you go, the perfect and it's like that's so effed up and not okay. And but like we've been subscribing to it for so long, just that proximity to whiteness.
Yeah.
Sort of. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of, that proximity and wondering where that kind of like value, I always think about what we're presented with. And in this play is really great because there's little snippets of the diaspora's culture. I feel like there's a level of like, yes, there's a differentiation has to be between the diaspora and the homelands. And what it is this adoption, I think, of a more like, I feel like pan Latinidad, where it's we all kind of subscribe to certain things. For example, I grew up listening to Selena, and Selena is actually one of those kind of icons that really, I feel like looking at her, I think so much about this thought of colorism, because people could look at her and be like, oh, she's not brown enough, and be like, oh, like, you know, like the J Lo, I guess, of celebrities in that
Yeah.
vein of color and skin tone and looks. But also, she was one of the brownest celebrities in her time to be in that mainstream, that platform that she was in.
Mhm.
So she actually was, especially in the face of like um, who her colleagues or like equals would have been in her time in terms of Mexican celebrities.
Yeah.
So it's like a lot of, there's this nuance here, and I think something that I wonder is, where is the focus best kept in terms of, we land in this place where, for the, I guess the first step, and I don't know if you agree with this, is like acknowledging that difference and those instincts at this point, because it feels so instinctual for people to be like, no, that's not like me,
Yeah.
or like, you don't count.
Mm-hmm. Which is surreal to me, because even within the same country, it's not the same. You know, like, I think about, I can speak specifically from the Mexican perspective. Like, northern Mexico is so radically different from southern Mexico. Like, there's so many like cultural differences even within the countries that it's surreal to me. Someone's like, well, I don't do that, so then that's not a real thing. And it's like, you're from a city. Like, you are not the entire, like, we're talking about multiple countries, you are from one place.
Yes.
And so I've never understood that.
Yeah. I try to think about it like, you're like this little, it feels like this little speck in the universe trying to define the universe.
Yeah.
Just like humans in general, I think. But that's why, like, there's this interesting specificity to your play, and also to these kinds of conversations, that I kind of sometimes have to step back from and try to look at the bigger picture of like, what is actually the most important when it comes to our legacy and our lineage.
Yeah.
Like, all right, let me take a look at some of these questions, because we're getting into it. And I want to also be aware of how much time I feel like this definition of gatekeeping is pretty solid, in terms of both terms and us figuring, like, thinking around the mess of it all. And I think we've landed in the place of like trying to figure out what is our responsibility, if any, our, like, specifically as director, as playwright, as the people that we are. Do you feel any particular responsibility outside of what you've wrote?
I'm not 100% sure I understand the question, but because of who I am as a person, I'm still going to answer it. And that's probably something I can fix in therapy later. But to me, my responsibility as a playwright is to write the community that I know, because I've never seen that community on stage. Like, I think about like how, and again, I love both of these things, but like In the Heights is like one of, like, I remember going and just like bawling my eyes out crying when it was over, because it was the first time I ever saw a neighborhood that looked like mine on stage ever. And like, I was like, oh my goodness, I know all of these people. I know this neighborhood. And even though I'm from LA, I'm not from New York. And I was still like, yep, that's my downtown LA neighborhood. Mm-hmm. But then like, there weren't really any Afro-Latinos in it at all. And then like shows like Vida, again, which is set in LA, which I love, 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 love. How do you have a whole show about LA and there's not a single, not even in the background? Like, and so for me, my responsibility as a playwright is to keep reminding people that Black Latinos, Black Latinx, Black Latins exist. Mm-hmm. You know, we exist. We've been here the whole time. And that our stories need to also be elevated and be part of the conversation. And so to me, that's my responsibility as a playwright. Sometimes that responsibility feels really heavy, because I'm coming from a perspective where one, I'm multicultural. My mom is Afro-Latin, but my dad he's American, he's African-American. And so one, it's like, well, I can only speak from my own perspective, and that's not always going to be perfect. And I'm already being questioned because of how I look. And then on top of that, whenever I do one like small imperfect thing, it's like, yep, get out. So to the best that I can, to me, my responsibility as a playwright is to get more diverse stories, specifically stories I've never seen on stage before. And part of that is having people talk about the Afro-Latinx experience and Afro-Latin experience. And that's all about, like, I feel like we're either the sexy person or like we're the side character that's like the witch. So just, I don't know, adding humanity to our stories as well. Sorry, I rambled for a bit.
Don't apologize. I love the ramble, mostly because in it I keep like, and I don't know if this is annoying in terms of like hearing you speak and then also hearing the play in the back of my head, because so much of what we grappled with as a cast was the character of Aaliyah and how every other person interacted with Aaliyah and how Aaliyah had to just essentially exist, and even that was hard. like Aaliyah was just existing, and people were demanding so many like answers and delineations from Aaliyah, at a point where I'm like, and just understanding that that's like just base level of existing. Having to represent and be, when someone looks at you, they're not just seeing Aaliyah, for example, or seeing the identity of Aaliyah, how Aaliyah identifies, and how, to a certain extent, people are like accusing her for keeping her identity secret, and that's not the case at all. Aaliyah's, I love all the characters. Aaliyah's one of my favorites, I'm not gonna lie, because there's so much in what is not said. And then there's like a few moments of release, but there's never really like an ending. I feel like we end this play in a place of like, there's some resolution, but there is also still the question of like, how exactly are they going to be okay?
Yeah.
Like, how do they continue? We saw the first steps of people acknowledging their mistakes, which, again, like I said, I think that's important. We have to acknowledge the ways that we're all keeping each other apart. And then what's next, which I don't have an answer. I don't think. I'm not going to try. I'm not.
The answer either. No.
That's not what we're here for. Let me squeeze in some fun questions in here. I was wondering some things that I thought about in terms of the relationships in the story. Where, if was there a particular starting point for you? Like, okay, this relationship definitely has to happen in this way. Like their arc has to end this way, or was there a lot of back and forth in terms of between drafts of how people were going to interact, or how in depth you got with their relationships?
I will answer the question, but I will say what's really cool is you've seen the draft from draft one. Like, so I think I'm curious to see what your answer to this question is too. Because I think from the player's perspective, it might be very different from the director's. And I think it's just really cool to be able to work with the director through multiple opportunities and presentations, and to really see how things change. And
it still could change. Like this,
it's definitely still going to change. Yeah, there's still more work to get done. The only thing I knew right away was that, so in Jessica Clark's thing, one of the things she put was that she had a line about like, I'm so sorry to all the partners I've lied to. And I just think about like, if I was with someone and then I found out, like, and let's say like we were together for 5 years and then we broke up, and then I found out in a newspaper that they weren't who they said they were, I would be burning cities down. Like I would not be. I would be like, let's wreck. And that's a breakup. And then my next part of my brain was like, well, what if the person I was currently with, in love with, madly in love with, had been lying? And so that's why I always knew that the story was going to center a relationship because of that line. I was like, that's a layer of like, I don't know if I can curse, effed upness that, that's just like, fine, you lied. Like the Slytherin in me, J.K. Rowling is trash. But the Slytherin in me is like, I get you lied for your job. Okay, fine, whatever. But you're lying to your partners too. So that relationship was always clear. Something I do in my writing a little bit too much is there's usually sister relationship. So I knew there'd also be a sister. And I wasn't sure when I first started writing the play what I would do with the character of Aaliyah. Aaliyah feels really close to my heart. And like if I'm a character in the play, I'm obviously Aaliyah. And so it's interesting to like have me be like, I don't see Aaliyah as the main, none of them are main characters, but like I don't see her as the main focus. To me, the main focus is Zoe and Jimena's relationship. But it was really interesting to explore this sub-relationship too of Aaliyah and Valerie. And so like I went in knowing I want Zoe and Jimena, the romantic relationship, and I want the sister relationship. Because I think of like the sister relationship between Haiti and the Dominican Republic a lot. And then Valerie and Aaliyah kind of came to pieces too, but I started with Zoe and Jimena, and I feel like it's changed to be much more of an ensemble than it was before.
Oh, 10,000. Speaking of my opinions and my thoughts, like, and it's also, I think it just speaks to how you really can't replace just working even in a virtual room with other people, and how they take to the material, but also how they take to each other. Like there were elements in this workshop that I hadn't really seen before, the kind of, specifically the relationship between Aaliyah and Valerie, that was like, I didn't really think about what it would be like. They're the only two students in the play. They seem to be the only two that are like really on the same level in terms of experience, or in terms of like place in the world, where they've been, where they're going in terms of their progress, but also they're completely two very different people, and not just two different people in terms of what they've experienced, but also in terms of their personalities and how they react, which could be influenced by what they've experienced, one being extremely light-skinned and one being, Black. So that was a lot of fun to explore this time around, getting the chance to really like play with that relationship. I also just want to like, I've already did this on a personal note, but I want to thank you for putting Dominican Haitian sisters in a play on the screen, on stage at this point. That's what, to me, I agree with what you feel your responsibility is for my responsibility as a director. My main goal is to see the people that I see in my life, both on stage and in the audiences. And it seems like such a simple thing to ask or to do, and it's very, very difficult. And so I thank you for that, for doing that, and for giving me the opportunity to do that as well. Something else about this group of people, and this play in particular, but this experience specifically with Wayward Voices, the room was really femme like it, and I didn't really realize it until we were kind of in the thick of rehearsal, and I looked at like my screen and at all the femme faces, and I was like, this feels great. Like I know it's not a secret to me that I really like working with femme identified folks, and it also it does feel like a little present when it happens, which is like, then again, why is that? It doesn't happen often for me. Yeah.
I love it. I love working with, I mean, if you read my work, you know, I love working with femme identifying folk or just femme folk. And because you're right, like, and my joke is that whenever I like do a play and people are like, oh, I want to be in it. Like one person commented on Facebook and they're like, well, I want to be in it, but I know there are no white men in it. And it's like, damn right, they're not. Oops, sorry for damn. Like, no, they're not, because that's all the plays that I saw. All the even plays that were supposed to be about the Black experience or the Latin experience, it had so many white people in it. And so I was just like, no, I'm going to change it. And so like, I like to think of like the token white. In my play, there's usually the token white to just kind of like scrunch my nose at all the times if I have to see a token Black or Latin person. And then I also think about women and the ways in which women are allowed to be presented both on the stage and screen. And we don't get to be messy. We don't get to be complicated. And that's completely against what I want to write. So I love it. And as we keep working together, I'm going to try my best to make all the rooms like that.
Yes, igual. Something else that I would be amiss if I did not mention as well, because it is something that was brought up in the room for this iteration, and something that I feel like has been one of those things that we developed across drafts, is what you just said about, you know, the fact of we can't be a mess, we always have to be put together. We can see and feel the pressures of that, I think, with Zoe. And we don't see, like, there's not the kind of like typical of like explosion or like kind of like climax of this person's mental health that I feel like we're used to as a culture, as a society, of like, oh, this person has some mental health issue, we have to see that combust at some point. There's not that here, and I think we see it in a very humanizing way, through the text and also through the performances that I've witnessed so far, really taking it as something that is a part of a person rather than defining a person, which I appreciate very much, and I know has been appreciated by people in the cast coming to me talking to about. I was running lines about for this particular scene, and you know, hearing the way that Rafa, for example, speaks to Aaliyah about Zoe and the care that's there amongst the worry. Yeah, but not dealing with her as if she's some kind of ticking time bomb or something.
Yeah. I feel like, so I was diagnosed with, I'm pretty open about this, so like, I don't know, warning, but I was diagnosed with bipolar 1 when I was about 18. And I just feel like whenever I see it on screen, it's people with bipolar are always breaking down, or like, they're always like a problem that has to be dealt with. And it's just, everyone's such a burden. And it's like, that's not what my life is like at all. Like, who doesn't have bad weeks? Like, and I just feel like I really hate the way in which mental illness, like you said, like if mental illness is mentioned in a play, then that's the whole play. And it doesn't just get to be like a piece of someone. Like, yes, I have bipolar, but like, I also have a lot of other great things going on, you know? And so I tried to write Zoe in a way where it's obvious that it's a real concern and it's real. It's not just a toss away, but it just doesn't define her. And that's something that's really important to me.
That's how I love that. Also, it's in that aspect of your characters. It is also in the aspect of your characters' queerness. Like that nuance is built in your writing that I think is really important, and also can be interesting to direct, because sometimes there's like this, not need, but like, again, instinct or like kind of baseline of like play it up in a certain way, or to play it in a way, but your text really like pushes people to really just sit in the words of like, she's my wife.
Yeah.
Which something that is not really, or is not always understood in a lot of places, especially like personally speaking from my experience in my culture. When I did come out to like family, friends, people are like, oh, you're just adding another thing, like another check mark against you. And I'm like, yeah, it's like, oh yeah, like big Dominican, light skin, whoever, whatever, and you like girls. That's nice. What are you? Who are you? And that's what I feel like. So I'm constantly like pushing to find those like varied experiences because, like you said, I don't see them a lot on stage or in text. But also, I feel like they bring the most out of the challenge of finding what's the conflict, because you kind of like put all of that on the backseat for the actual conflict, which is, I think, the meat of any drama. Yeah. Like, what exactly is at conflict? A person's being can't be the conflict here.
Right.
Like a person identifying a certain way, that can't be what causes everything. It really is how people use the tool of identity, which we haven't even talked about Jimena, but I don't know if I want to give any space to that. I spent a lot of time shaking my head at that instance. Though again, it did, having a character like Jimena to direct did give me the practice that I feel is most useful to me as a director, which is why I prefer, like, directing is one of my main things. I do a lot of things, but directing is my real passion, amongst all of the other things I do, like teach and produce, because it gives you the permission to step into the life of someone that you might have absolutely no connection to or want to have a connection with.
Yeah.
And I think that work is important as well, as putting out perspectives that you don't usually see.
Definitely.
We're kind of like at 30 minutes. Is there anything else you want to say?
No, this has been lovely. I think that, like, if for the people that can catch the play, I hope that they do. I got to see it, and like, it made me so happy. And so thank you so much for the work that you did, and to the cast and to Wayward. It just was, I watched it when I was pretty down, and it like completely lifted me up. And so that was pretty incredible. So thank you so much for the attention you continue to give this play. And I'm thankful for it.
Thank you. Again, like I said before, thank you for the opportunity to play with it, because it's such a, and your work is like, each play is different, of course. So this play like is very specific. But also there are things that carry over and are similar. Like you said, you discuss gatekeeping in a number of your plays. So, but yeah, specifically this play, it has a really close, really important to my heart. Okay, I don't know how to close this, Reed. Chris.